The pitching pipeline continues to pay dividends. Plus, the great tease in Seattle just keeps on chugging. That's all coming up on Bleav in Mariners. What is up, sports fans? What's up, Mariners fans? Welcome back to another episode of Bleav in Mariners. I am Schultzy, Jordon Schultz, whichever one you want to call me, a Pacific Northwest talk show host from Portland, Oregon. And boy, what a tease the Seattle Mariners have been the last week in the playoff race or so. You had a chance to see Seattle get within 3 games of Houston a couple of different times in the last few days, but alas, just not really working in the Mariners' favor. Only winning 2 out of the last 5. That's going back to the St. Louis series, as well as their little 2-game stretch in San Diego. Was there for Wednesday's game. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Bryan Woo's amazing performance in that win, one of 2 wins for Seattle. But the Mariners essentially with that 2 out of the last 5 only being wins, essentially hanging by a thread in the playoff race. A record, as I tape this on Friday early afternoon, of 74 and 73. The Mariners not mathematically eliminated yet, but the postseason chances are slim. I'm sure I'm not really giving anybody new info tuning in, but damn it, it sucks. And I'm lamenting at that and kind of just giving y'all a place to lament at that as well. So if you want to leave me a comment on Twitter, let me know how unhappy you are about it. On the air, Jordan with an O. You can find me on our Bleav in Mariners YouTube page as well. Just really frustrated that we've kind of seen this up and down and up and down with the Seattle Mariners. Like, their hitters have been putting it together. You go back, I give a lot of great stats actually on our last episode of Bleav in Mariners, just how much better Victor Robles even, and he was already great, how much better Victor Robles, Julio, Cal Raleigh, Luke Raley have all been, and more have been, since Dan Wilson and Edgar Martinez, specifically Edgar, really putting the hitting program into place, have taken over and kind of simplifying the approach for the Seattle Mariners, going from all this extra information to see ball, hit ball. And, you know, hearing all that news, you get excited thinking, oh my goodness, my Mariners still have a chance. And I've been saying it on Twitter. I am sick. I have a teal green sickness to where I do believe the Seattle Mariners, 3.5 games out, have a chance. But now it's not looking as likely. 74 and 73, like I said, as I tape this episode, which means 15 games remaining as I tape this episode, with 4.5 games separating the Seattle Mariners and the Houston Astros. It ain't looking good, folks. And same story, by the way, for the Mariners and the wild card at this point. Just 4.5 games separating them and the Minnesota Twins. But once again, to quote Jack Bauer, we're running out of time. So Fangraphs now putting the Mariners' chances at making the playoffs at a very slim, like 4.3%. It's not good. And that's to win the division. The chances for them to win the wild card are pretty much gone. According to Fangraphs, a 1.1% chance. And to win the World Series, it's down to a 0.2. So, yeah, there is still a chance, but after Seattle's really heartbreaking loss and that comeback win by the Texas Rangers, because the Seattle Mariners did have a lead at a couple of really good hits, couple of good homers. It really, like I said, it seems like the bats are actually a lot better now, but unfortunately, because the bullpen has been trying to sustain all of these, crazy close wins, as we'll get into here in a second, with a crazy 1-run stat that the Mariners really aren't doing well in, because the bullpen is having to sustain those late innings early in the year, that they really have no gas left when it comes to late in the season, even when your hitters are starting to turn it around and give you 4-run leads, give you 3-run leads. It's just not happening. And I mean, credit to Dipoto trying to get Jimmy Garcia, trying to get JT Schwargois in here, knowing that the bullpen does need some help. Troy Taylor has been nails. Go back and listen to the last episode of Bleav in Mariners. You hear how far I think that he's going to go with the Mariners. But really frustrating to see just this back and forth, up and down. And it's extra frustrating that it's happening, obviously, at the end of the season in games that are teams that you should be beating, in my opinion. I'm sorry, the Texas Rangers just, yeah, they're all right, but without Corey Seager, that they aren't the same World Series team that they were last year. The Mariners starting the season 17-5 versus the AL West. And usually you finish up your season against a lot of opponents in your division. Since then, this is a tweet from Daniel Kramer. Thanks for putting this together. They are 5-13 against the division with 9 games left against those opponents. Essentially, the Mariners just have not played well against these teams that they should be beating and are given the opportunity to beat at the end of their season. And even with, the hitters doing well, even with Julio Rodriguez actually hitting a couple of bombs the last few games, even with Luke Raley playing, I would say, way, way above his level. I mean, we're getting an overall average season of Luke Raley, kind of normal what you would expect from him. Same with like Cal Raleigh, but lately Luke Raley definitely been heating up. But yeah, Mariners losing games which they should win. And that is even with a shorthanded team. That is even with a batter too short and Jerry Dipoto not fully setting this team up for success, in my opinion. So super frustrated as we go into the weekend with the 3 games left against the Texas Rangers at T-Mobile Park before the New York Yankees come to town. And that is going to be a tough one. Not going to be easy facing off against the Yankees and the Astros for 6 out of your remaining 15 games. But hey, the Mariners do have some positives to lean on. The pitching staff has been one, of course, a huge bright spot for the last, 3 years in the organization. And this year has been almost one of the best in Major League Baseball at home, actually. Almost as good of an ERA as the best in the American League, Tarik Skubal. Like, it's insane to think that Tarik Skubal is going to be like 1-5 for Seattle when you're coming in as an opponent into T-Mobile Park to face off against them. But essentially, that's the equivalent of what hitters are having to do. So yeah, pitching staff has been amazing. Luis Castillo, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, all having their impressive seasons. Of course, Kirby has kind of started to taper back a little bit. His last 8 starts haven't really been as good. But, despite Castillo, unfortunately, probably not going to have him for the rest of the season. Maybe. They're saying maybe, but probably not. There's 15 games left, so you might get him for 1 start, if that. 3.64 ERA, over 175 innings, as well as 175 strikeouts. So, we're loving what you're getting. Unfortunately, he's down for the rest of the year, but you're loving what you're getting from the top of the rotation, and it's as you expect, right? Unfortunately, despite the strong pitching, the Mariners struggling in clutch moments, 18-24 in 1-run games, which has been a major killer for their postseason hopes, but that's really not even been the main reason that they've been losing. Yeah, it's worth pointing out that they're losing in close games, and that's not really happening like it was earlier in the year. And I heard Mariners announcers calling a lot of their wins earlier in the season chaos ball, and then in the season 2 years ago where they made the playoffs in 2022, you do have the most 1-run wins, I think, in Major League history there. So just not really going the same way for Seattle. And when you're a hitter short, or 2 hitters short, or when the guys that you bring in, don't really start to do anything until maybe after you fire your manager and bring in a new hitting coach in Edgar Martinez to try and get that all sorted out. There's certainly some understanding, as we've all been talking about, as to why Mariners fans are pissed that the stars are not lining up right, because this starting pitching staff and these younger 2 guys that we're about to talk about here, and Bryce Miller and Bryan Woo, this collection of a pitching staff this good, this cheap, never happens in Major League Baseball. And got to take some time really quickly to identify how great, obviously the most glaring issue that the Mariners need to address this offseason is the offense, for sure. We can talk about some of the bright spots and what they're going to need to do going forward. But I did want to try to give Bryce Miller and Bryan Woo their props. Of course, if you did see Wednesday's game, that Bryan Woo threw a no-hitter at least into the 7th inning. Excuse me, not a no-hitter, but a perfect game. Dude was perfect through 6 innings, retired 19 straight, actually, 7 1/3 before giving up a laser shot home run to Fernando Tatis Jr. Yeah, that sucked, but Bryan Woo basically coming through just as nails. He has been one of the best young pitchers, not only in the Seattle Mariners organization this year, but in Mariners history. Gary Hill putting this tweet out yesterday, saying the lowest ERA for the first 19 starts of the season for the Mariners. Number 1 is Felix Hernandez. That was in 2014 at 2.11. Randy Johnson in 97 at 2.22. And now you got Bryan Woo in 24 with a 2.38 ERA. These numbers are astounding. His last 8 starts going so well. 2.42 ERA, 0.75 whip, 45 Ks to just 4 base on balls over 52 innings pitched. He's been going way deeper in games. If you look in like the last 30 games, it's pretty crazy to see his splits. He threw 105 total innings in his last 7 games. He has thrown 45 innings. Yes, there were a couple of injuries, some short appearances in there, but you really go do look at the games that he has been pitching in by appearance, and you see that he is getting deeper. That's happening almost every single game later in the season now. You can go to August 2nd, 7 innings, then 6.2 on August 8th, back to 7 innings on August 14th, 6.1 on August 19th, 7 innings again on August 25th. The dude is always, at least since the All-Star break ended and we got the second half of the season going, always been able to give you 6+ innings. And then you talk about a guy who almost had the first perfect game in Mariners history since Felix Hernandez, and I still think, I didn't check this before I started taping the podcast, but like one of 30 ever in Major League Baseball history, or one of around 30 or just less than 30 or something like that. You've got Bryce Miller, who has also been absolute nails. Another great pitching performance this week. This one was put up by Mariners PR. Bryce Miller has a 1.96 ERA, 14 earned runs, and 64.1 innings pitched, with 10 walks and 61 strikeouts over his last 11 starts since July 10th. That's good for second best ERA in the American League and fourth best in MLB during that span. And then another one by Cam, a huge Mariners fan on Twitter, putting out a picture of the MLB ERA leaders since June 19th when Bryce Miller added his knuckle curve. He is 5th overall in the major leagues with a 2.16 ERA, up there with the likes of Paul Skeens, Framber Valdez, Zach Wheeler, Chris Sale, and Blake Snell. Those are some good names. And obviously the Mariners on the pitching side don't really have much to worry about, especially when it comes to the starting rotation. They've got a surplus in that area. And you kind of wonder, if they're going to need to trade some of that surplus come the offseason to actually get a couple of hitters into this lineup. And I say a couple because the Mariners really are leaning on Cal Raleigh he's quietly been one of the best offensive catchers in baseball this season, right? But they're leaning on him essentially to be the entire offense without Julio Rodriguez. I mean, we've seen the discrepancy in RBIs. Leaders, it's Cal Raleigh at 90 plus, I think like 91 or 2 now for the Mariners, all the way down to Mitch Haniger near 50. It's pretty paltry. Raleigh's hit 30 home runs. That's a new Mariners record for homers by a catcher for this team, of course. Got a ton of power. And yeah, he's hitting 215, but also draws a lot of walks. So that pushes his on-base percentage up to 307. Pretty good. And he's been a rock behind the plate. He's thrown out almost 31% of guys trying to steal on him. That's good for 31% in the MLB. I know that's a little bit of defense, but overall, Cal Raleigh is one of the top catchers in baseball, and the Mariners essentially are leaning on him to, sustain his normal performance, which now I think Mariners fans are expecting 25, 30 homers out of him a year. That's what he's done in his full seasons in the major leagues. But if Julio's having half a good season and Luke Raley and Victor Robles are the only ones that are performing up to like a mediocre standard, up to the standard that like you expect, like guys hitting 240. That's kind of what you're hoping, the minimum that he does coming in, right? Especially a guy like Victor Robles gets on base more, bunts a lot. Luke Raley, he's probably going to hit like 220, 230. But he is maybe 240, but he is going to hit like 20 homers for you. And he's having a pretty average season. But you go down the list. Other than that, Justin Turner, since he got here, he's been better since Edgar started, but not really as good as he was earlier in this season, though thankfully that 2-homer day, it was 2 solo jacks, but that 2-homer day earlier this week did improve his stats a little bit. But really just a lot of holes in this lineup. Josh Rojas hasn't looked like a professional hitter the second half of the year. It's like they figured out how to pitch to him. And for some reason, the Mariners are not giving at bats to Leo Rivas anymore since JP Crawford came back up. I mean, I get that they're going to start JP. Your organization gave him a ton of money to play shortstop, so you can't really remove him until like an ultimate decision is made between Dan Wilson, John Stanton, and Jerry Dipoto. It sucks that Dan Wilson can't make that decision alone, but at least they are dropping him lower in the lineup, right? When JP came back initially from his injury, Dan Wilson was talking about, JP being comfortable at the top of the lineup. So that was one of the reasons why he wanted him still to hit there. But now, I mean, no holds barred. We are near the end. It is less than half a month left until the end of the regular season. So he is now batting 7th or 8th, as he should be. He's hitting under 200. So obviously the Mariners this offseason, if they can, need to go acquire a proven middle of the order bat or a young up and coming middle of the order bat or two, not a fringe guy, not a reclamation project. And I do believe, I hope anyways, I do believe Jerry Dipoto can actually go get a player or two of note, like a Randy Arozarena or like a young outfielder up and coming like Riley Green or something like that. Not necessarily thinking that like the Tigers are ready to trade him, but somebody like a Riley Green, if the Mariners could give up an elite starting pitcher, which sucks, but it kind of seems like they have to at this point. I wonder if it's going to be Logan Gilbert, if it's going to be George Kirby. Definitely doesn't seem like it's going to be Brian Wu or Bryce Miller at this point. And you just kind of have to hope that Jerry's got something in the back of his pocket like he did at like the trade deadline, where they didn't have to give up, the Mariners didn't have to give up any of their top prospects for, actual legitimate impact bats. And on top of that, are you going to keep Randy Arozarena? He's, in my opinion, been somebody that's kind of been unhappy to be here at times. He lets fastballs go by. Somebody explained to me, I saw on Wednesday when I was at the game watching Brian Wu get through 7 1/3 perfect. I did see Randy Arozarena just backing up, like taking a literal strike down the middle. And I am so sick of seeing Mariners hitters taking fastballs down the middle. But Randy's like, just let it go in there. See if you can hit a strike. I'm kind of expecting you to throw a ball. They aren't ready. The hitters still aren't always ready for that fastball down the middle, first or second pitch of the at bat. And you wonder, with Edgar's, basic see ball, hit ball approach kind of coming back into their minds, if that's like going to translate soon to hitting first pitch or second pitch fastballs, or if that's something that like the organization is like driven into their heads not to just take the easy fastball. That's something that they've driven into their heads so much that they're just too scared to do it. But I feel like I'm kind of half like looking at, the offseason plans for the Seattle Mariners, kind of half like wondering what's going to happen for the rest of this year, because this has just been such a giant tease from the Seattle Mariners the last week or so. It's been a fun time to watch them win. It's been fun watching them hit better, watching them hit more homers. But I got to say, watching the bullpen falter a little bit, because it's been built on a house of cards that really, I mean, it has been one of the best in baseball, struggling as of late, but, a successful approach. The Dipoto regime really has been able to identify guys that can be elite, like with a little tweak that some other organization wasn't able to identify, at least temporarily. They can get a good year. They can get a good half a season out of them, and then they'll trade them, or they'll just kind of move on. Then they'll be very good at picking and choosing like when to call the next guy up to have a good run of a couple of months, and then send him back down for another guy to come up, have a good run for a couple of months. I mean, you've seen that positive approach work, but unfortunately, your hitter's just not sustainable throughout the year at all. And that has forced the bullpen to try to hold it down every single night, and you just can't. But you do want to see the Mariners continue, of course, to build around Andres Munoz. When Matt Brash comes back next season, it's going to be awesome. Troy Taylor, and hopefully he will look the same, especially as a bullpen pitcher. Since you're throwing less, you would hope that like he has a better chance of keeping his velocity and keeping all that nasty break on his pitches, that 12-6 curveball from Matt Brash. Ooh, it's disgusting. And then, the young new guy, Troy Taylor. I mean, if you build around those guys and you can acquire a couple of hitters in the offseason, then, but that's a big if. And you're going to have to trade a starting pitcher to do so, because there's no way that there's going to be a free agent to come here. No way you're going to get a free agent hitter to sign in Seattle unless you badly, vastly overpay them. Why, after seeing this organization's offensive philosophy the past few years, would anybody want to come here? They would be too scared that their numbers are going to crater and they never be able to get a job in Major League Baseball again. But all in all, 15 games remaining as I tape this. We'll see. We're going to be talking about these offseason moves soon. It really does feel like, but we'll see if the Mariners can still keep up that giant tease that they've got going on. 4.5 out of the wild card, 4.5 behind the Astros for first place in the AL West with 15 games remaining, and see if the Mariners actually can. If it gets to September 23rd, 10 days from now, if the Mariners are within 2 or 3 games of Houston, theoretically, they do still have a big chance. But do you really think they can sweep the Houston Astros come September 23rd? I don't think so. Let's just be honest. I don't think so. And I hate to wrap it up on a negative note here on Bleav In Mariners, but that is going to do it for this episode of the podcast. Make sure you give it a 5-star rating and review. Also, follow it on Apple or Spotify. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the Bleav In Mariners channel and like the video, leave a comment. All the algorithms love all that interaction. Really appreciate it. Still out to a former Seattle Mariners player. Would love to have a continuing co-host on this show that played Major League Baseball, played for the Mariners, that really could offer up some really great perspective that I never could. So if you know a former Seattle Mariner, or you are a Seattle Mariner, used to play ball, they're listening to this podcast, hit me up on the air, Jordan with an O on Twitter, or hit Bleav Up. Hit me up via email, jordanschultz@yahoo.com. Get in touch and we'll make it happen for you. But all right, Mariners fans, appreciate it. Hopefully we'll still be rooting for these guys to get into the playoffs come September 23rd. But I guess the next week or so is going to tell. We're really down to putting your money where your mouth is, seeing if the proof is in the pudding for Seattle. We'll see if they can actually get a series win against the Texas Rangers, because if it's a split, they're done. It ain't happening. But thanks so much for tuning in, Mariners fans. Stay safe and keep those tridents up. See you soon.